Fantasy Football RSVP. This is Dean Curry of the Curry in a Hurry Show. Week number 13 for the NFL schedule. We have, for a lot of people, this is the start of your playoffs. So you got to start thinking about many things, including handcuffs at this point, and what your playoff schedule is going to be. Some of you, are on the cusp of really making a difference. But remember, if you get in the playoffs, anything could happen. So it doesn't matter, if you're a 6-7 record or anything like that going against a 12-1 record, or you have the least points of the playoff people. If you're in the playoffs, anything could happen. But we have to start thinking about matchups over the next 4 weeks. And this is where I really pride myself on giving advice that really, makes a difference. I would probably start with running backs. I would start with Josh Adams. I've been talking about this guy for, Philadelphia for quite some time now. He's a great pickup. He just seems, I had one catch last week, but usually he's good for 3 to 5 catches for 40 or 50 yards. He had a big week running the ball. It looks like he's the bell cow in Philadelphia. I don't even know if he's available on your waiver wire, but if he is, you really want to, pick him up. He could, perform well for you in the coming weeks. He has some, tough matchups as far as I think he goes against Washington, Dallas, the Rams, but they use this guy in many different ways with that spread offense in Philadelphia. This guy catches the ball out of the backfield. I think he's a great pickup. If Gus Edwards, I told everyone to pick him up last week. They really love him. The last 2 weeks, they really love him in Baltimore, and I don't know if he's even available at this point. Of course, Alex Collins was out, but they really like this guy as a north-south runner, and I think they're going to stay with him. He's not catching the ball a lot out of the backfield, but that could maybe change. He's really, getting all the carries, and he looks like, Baltimore, I'm always iffy about recommending their running backs because it just seems like who's the flavor of the week to play at running back, and just when you think you got it figured out, whether it's Collins or whomever, it looks like, Harbaugh just changes it up and goes with somebody else. And, I don't know, why it always seems to happen that way. Maybe he's still looking for his, bell cow north-south runner, but apparently this running back Harbaugh really likes. So, I say it with a slight bit of hesitancy because Collins was out, but I have a feeling they're going to see what they have with this Gus Edwards. And I actually watched a couple games with him, and, he looks like a special runner. I'm real physical. Collins is good too, but I think Gus Edwards looks better. He just looks like a real bruising, back, and I would definitely pick him up. Use him with some caution, but he should be a great running back. Everyone knows that Melvin Gordon, has an MCL, and he might be out a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. They didn't really give a designation as of yet, but they're suspecting he might be out several weeks. And I've been mentioning it here and there about handcuffing certain running backs as you get towards the end of the season, and Eckler is one of the names that has come up, along with a couple of others, which I will give you in a moment. But at running back, you really want to have, some, handcuffs. I think it's even more important than a handcuff at wide receiver, because wide receiver, there's always, other people to throw to, and a lot of times people have some nice, running backs on their bench that they're just itching to play. But when it comes to running backs, a lot of these teams don't have that bell cow. They're in a shared timeshare. And when you have a quarterback with a great running back with a great offensive line go down, you really want to have, a handcuff. And Austin Eckler, is a perfect situation, a great offense, great offensive line. And now Melvin Gordon is out. And, I really doubt at this point Eckler is even available. But if he is, he should be your first waiver wire, option at this point. And again, I'm mentioning someone that I think is taken, but, a few people have let me know that Eckler is available in their waiver wire, believe it or not. And if he is, you want to pick him up. Who might still be available at this point? I would maybe go with Doug Martin. Not a typical suggestion of mine, but he's been consistent. Gruden's using him. And, he was suspected to have a little bit of an injury, but he played and he catches the ball in the backfield and he runs the ball. And at this point, it's hard to find running backs. And he's probably available on your waiver wire. So I would look at that. As far as other handcuffs, think of your offensive teams, teams like Kansas City, Pittsburgh, that have great offensive line, like the Chargers. The number 2 right now is not Ridley in Pittsburgh. It's actually Jalen Samuels. And believe it or not, this guy is a very versatile back. He's a rookie, but he caught 65, 55, and 75 receptions as a running back in college, which is unbelievable because running backs do not catch the ball that much, in college. And he is clearly, they even mentioned several reports that he is clearly the number 2. And at this point, James Conner hasn't looked that great. Maybe he's wearing down. Sometimes what happens is an injury comes up. Maybe he's already injured and not even talking about it. Doesn't look like the same player he looked like, several weeks ago. And now we're going on a couple of weeks where, he didn't look that great. He fumbled. I watched the Steelers game, and he just doesn't look the same. And he might be actually carrying, and this is just, a guess, maybe he's a little banged up, and they're not just mentioning it. And if that's the case, he might play, and you never know if this guy goes down to an injury. If you have room on your bench, you might want to pick up Jalen Samuels or Spencer Ware of the Chiefs. Great offense. Kareem Hunt looks amazing. I never felt Kareem Hunt was really like a big back, and I've been saying for a couple of years now, this guy's going to get popped and injured. He just doesn't look that big out there. I mean, his legs look, like they're built, but the rest of him, he just looks like a small guy, and a lot of times they throw it over the middle to him and and they throw him the ball a lot, and he just gets popped. I'm just a little concerned. You might want to pick up Spencer Ware because, that could be a great handcuff. And, if I don't wish injuries on anyone, but if, Hunt goes down, having Spencer Ware, if you have the room on your bench, could be a huge pickup. Let's go to wide receivers before we get to quarterbacks and tight ends. Adam Humphries is someone I've been talking about for a while. If he's available, you want to pick him up. They have some tough matchups coming up. Teams with great corners in Carolina, Baltimore, Dallas, and even New Orleans, whose defense has really been playing well lately. They shut down Wentz, and they're just really, New Orleans is really looking good. Atlanta, they're just playing, really well right now. Maybe Eli Apple helped solidify their defense. He wasn't that great with the Giants, but you never know. A team, he looks like he's playing well. Their defense looks like they're playing well. Adam Humphries is going up against Carolina, Baltimore, New Orleans, and Dallas. So these are good secondaries, and their corners are probably going to be covered, and a great dump-off play in almost every game. Winston and the Bucs are going to be behind. So you have to start thinking about game scripts, and you have to take an intelligent approach to these things. Game scripts are going to be behind, and the corners are going to be covered pretty well. It's a great time to throw it over the middle to Adam Humphries, and they seem to be using him quite a bit. Half a dozen, catches, 60, 70 yards, getting touchdowns. His numbers may climb. Now, this next one is a Carolina Panther. And anyone who listens to my tapes, I always say the only people that play in Carolina is the quarterback, the running back, and occasionally Olsen at tight end. You can never trust the wide receivers, and it's not Cam's fault, just the way they play offense. It's just not consistent, and it's unreliable. Is it going to be DJ Moore? Is it going to be Funchess? Is Samuel? Who are they going to throw the ball to? And, this DJ Moore seems to be growing on me a lot. And something that is sort of a game changer, why I'm even recommending him, is that he's going up against Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Cleveland, New Orleans. They have a very friendly schedule coming up. And, you may want to consider that. They're starting to use the guy. He's coming up big. There's a little bit of a trust factor. Again, I'll always use a little hesitancy and caution in recommending a Carolina Panther, but it looks like they're really starting to use the guy. And, with a little bit of hesitancy and the fact that they have a favorable schedule and they really have to win, I got to believe that sooner or later they're going to start paying a little bit more attention to McCaffrey, who's it's like a one-man show on offense, and eventually defenses catch up and start to key in on him. You might start seeing some openings for DJ Moore. And what I really like about DJ Moore, which kind of trumps why I'm even recommending him, is he kind of does things after the catch. He's sort of an electric guy with big playability. So even if he gets 4 or 5 or 6 catches, he might break one with his speed and quickness, which he's been doing. So I'm not so sure the fact that he's not getting, those targets that are so high, like 10, 12 targets, and the fact that they have a favorable schedule, you might want to look at him. Another receiver outside of, the Panthers, another team where I'm hesitant to recommend wide receivers outside of Doug Baldwin is Seattle. Seattle Seahawks, good running backs, great to play Russell Wilson, but who's going to get the ball on offense? But Lockett, you might want to look at as well. He's been picking up, but the one I kind of like a little bit more is David Moore. We have DJ Moore, David Moore, and more of it. And again, this is if you really need somebody. And what I like about David Moore is he's a big play ability kind of guy. So even though he might get 4 or 5 or 6, catches a game, they seem to be big plays. There's a lot of air yards, in David Moore. And I would definitely look at that. They play Kansas City. They play San Francisco twice. San Francisco, I've been saying all year, I think they have an underrated defense. And Miami, which sometimes their defense plays well, maybe sometimes not so much, but, they're decent. But David Moore, and it just looks like Seattle, it just looks like they're really coming on of late. Russell Wilson tends to electrify at the end of the season. It just takes them a while to get going and figure things out. And it looks like they're starting to air the ball out a little bit more. And the same thing happened the last year and the year before that and the year before that. The numbers just start to climb. And because of that, I'm going against the grain and recommending David Moore because I like his big play ability. And if you're desperate, he might be available on your waiver wire. Of course, the Rams, you have Reynolds, who's filling in for, Cooper Kupp. He's probably not available. I'm only mentioning him because a couple of people mentioned to me that he's still surprisingly available in a couple of people's waiver wires. I don't know how, but if he is, you definitely want to pick him up. Something you want to pay attention to, too, is Conley of Kansas City. He had a huge game, 25, 30 points in fantasy, receptions, touchdowns, and he was just, the guy looked amazing. And he's filling in for Sammy Watkins, so you want to read that report of Sammy Watkins. He tried to play last game. They were coming off a bye week this last week, but so he's probably getting closer to healthy. But, he tried to play the game. It was really strange is during the warm-ups, before the game, he was actually limping. So I'm surprised they actually even played him, and then they pulled him quickly. And they're not saying it's this horrific injury, but, like I said, he was limping into the game, and, they pulled him quickly. So obviously it wasn't working for him. And these type of foot injuries and stuff like that and leg injuries tend to linger. And even though he had the time off, he probably is going to play, this coming week in 13. But keep an eye on it, because if he's injured and they rest him, this Conley guy looked amazing, and they were throwing to him and weren't hesitant, so you might want to look at that. As far as tight ends, moving right along, you could go with either Rams tight end, because they seem to be spreading the ball more with Cooper Kupp out. You could go with Everett or Higbee. Higbee had more targets before this last week's bye week. But, I got to say, I really like Everett, more than Higbee. Higbee is more of the, possession type of, receiver. He stretches the ball a little bit, but Everett's their electric guy. Everett's their big play guy. And, getting those big plays, especially against Kansas City, where Everett had the big play at the end of the game, those are confidence-building, trust-building types of catches. And I have a feeling they might start, and it's a bit of a risk to say who are they going to throw to more, but they seem to be using both of them. I mean, either of them could prove to be, 4 or 5 catches, 50 yards, and sometimes you'll take those 10 points, and maybe get lucky with a touchdown. You'll take those 10 points because the tight end slot is so thin at this point. But if I had to pick between the two, I like them both. I'd probably go with Everett. David Njoku for the Cleveland Browns, very inconsistent. 1 week good, 1 week bad, but I sense that they're starting to really showcase him a little bit more. Say it with a little bit of hesitancy because of the inconsistency. I don't like that. But I'm saying if you have no other options, he's great after the catch. He's tough to take down. Had a crazy touchdown trying to jump into the end zone, dive into the end zone, the 5-yard line, landed on his feet, still tried to get in there and did. Got basically pushed in. But, they seem to be developing a little bit of a trust there. If you have no other options, you may want to do that. Certainly if Cameron Brate, I doubt he is available, you want to pick him up. He didn't have a great week or a bad week last week, but he got his usual yardage and touchdown. It was a pretty decent week, and you want to consider looking at him. As far as tight ends and who they play, if you have a tight end, I don't think it really matters if the defense is good against the tight end. There's a couple of teams that are pretty decent, but not the ones that I mentioned, so I wouldn't worry about that. At quarterback, I told everyone to pick up Baker Mayfield last week, actually the last 2 weeks, and of course he had a big game. It was a great call. And if he is still available, which he might be, some people, they have their quarterbacks already and don't feel the need to pick up another one and would rather roster their team with like running backs, tight ends for the playoffs. And sometimes Baker Mayfield might still be, sitting out there. You might want to pick him up. He, plays Cincinnati. Very favorable. He has a couple of decent matchups, tougher matchups against Baltimore and Denver and Carolina. But think about it. In those games, they're probably going to be playing from behind. And if they're playing from behind, it doesn't really matter that their, secondary is somewhat good because they're just going to air it out and, they're out of the playoffs. So there's really no pressure on Baker Mayfield, and this is why I was telling everyone to pick him up, because I was telling everyone you're going to see him really rise in the last number of weeks because he's not going to make the playoffs. And, mathematically there's still a chance, but I highly doubt it. And, when they're not in the playoffs anymore, it's just going to allow him to feel less and less pressure and just air it out. And we see this a million times, over the years. You might want to consider that. Jameis Winston, if he's available, you might want to pick him up. Yes, he has some hard matchups coming up against Carolina, Baltimore, Dallas, and New Orleans. And again, I know people always jump when I say New Orleans, defense. be careful. But anyone who's been watching them play over the last several weeks, their defense and secondary has been playing really, really well. And they've been shutting down great quarterbacks like Carson Wentz and such. And they were a great defense last year, and they started off the season slow, and that happens a lot with defenses. You have moving parts, guys coming in, but it looks like they're really coming together. It looks like Eli Apple, who looked a little lost in the Giants, found a home there, and sometimes plugging in a decent guy there allows the other corners and secondary to solidify other weaker positions, and it just pieces it together really nice. They're playing really well right now, their defense. And I'm mentioning their defenses with Jameis Winston because I think Tampa Bay is going to be behind in all those games. And these are the things that a lot of people don't pay attention to because they say, oh, these tough defenses, I'm not going to play Jameis Winston. No, that's actually wrong because they're going to be behind, which means anyone who owns Barber as a running back because, oh, Barber's going well and, I'm going to start playing him. No, they're going to be behind. They're going to abandon the running game and they're going to just air it out. And don't forget, Jameis Winston's playing for his job right now. And, he's going to, do everything he can to win these games. They're going to be behind, and these defenses will play prevent defense, and they're going to give him that short pass over the middle, which Winston loves doing. And he's going to gain a lot of yards, especially in the second half when they're way behind and they're playing these good defenses. So the fact that playing these good teams and good defenses is actually a good thing for Jameis Winston when it comes to fantasy. And these are the types of things you have to pay attention to. As far as I told everyone to pick up Dak Prescott 2 weeks ago. I told them again last week. He may still be available in your waiver wire because, like I said, a lot of people don't pick up quarterbacks. If he is, the guy is looking better and better. And I've told everyone who gave up on Dak Prescott that Dak has put up big fantasy numbers before, and he's done it over numerous weeks. He gets, the running going. Sometimes he runs in for a touchdown. And, having Amari Cooper has really solidified that offense. But really, and I've been saying this all year, is their offensive line was banged up. And it was going to take them to halfway through the year to get everyone back. And now all of a sudden they're getting their offensive line back. And it's giving Dak, a little bit more time. And a lot of people were down on him. And I said, don't be down on him. This guy has put up big numbers. Their offensive line is getting healthier each week. Towards the middle of the season, they'll have everyone back. And then they, of course, got Amari Cooper, which stretches the field. But as you can see, all of a sudden Zeke Elliott is doing better. A lot of it, has to do with opening the offense, stretching the field with Amari, but a lot of it really has to do with the fact that their offensive line is healthy. And when they're healthy, they're the best in the league. Even I'd put them before Pittsburgh, believe it or not. If you're desperate for a quarterback, one you might want to look at still, we're getting really thin here, so I'm going to maybe mention someone that I wouldn't normally mention, but you might be desperate for a start. You might want to look at Marcus Mariota. He's been injured, and you got to monitor that. But they're trying to get into the playoffs. They're going to be playing the Jets, New York Giants, who have an underrated defense, Houston, Washington. And Washington's defense is good, but their offense is really sputtering now that Alex Smith is out and their offensive line is banged out, which means it's going to put more pressure on their defense, which means that their defense probably won't be as productive as it was before because they're going to be on the field more and worn out. And Marcus Mariota was looking really good in the last number of weeks. Before last week, he got a little banged up. So you might, if you're desperate, you might want to look at him, just to throw another name out there. As far as defenses, Tennessee Titans might be available. I'm just trying to think of what teams might be available on defense. If you need a defense, they're going against the Jets. Who knows who's going to be playing, whether McCown, a quarterback, and you just have to, temper expectations with the Jets because they're figuring things out. And, you don't know really who's going to play quarterback. And their team just isn't very good right now, although their tight end, you may want to look at Chris Herndon. He's been actually coming on as a tight end. Might be a sneaky play. Whoever is actually quarterbacking for the Jets. But chances are Tennessee is playing at home. They tend to play better at home going against, the New York Jets. You might want to pick that up. If you're desperate for another one, you might want to look at the Packers at home. They're desperate for a win going against Arizona. Arizona's rebuilding. They're showing a little bit of offense here and there, but they're playing in Lambeau, and the Packers play really well there, and they're really desperate for a win. And the Packers' defense, I think, is actually underrated. I think their defense is a little better than people say, and it might be a little sneaky play. As far as kickers, I know a lot of people don't give a lot of credit to kickers, but one that actually has been playing really well throughout the entire year, and he's kicked 23 of 24 field goals, believe it or not, is Aldrick Rosas for the New York Giants. And the Giants actually have a little problems getting the ball in the end zone. And that's kind of what you want with a kicker, is a team that is moving the ball. And anyone that's been watching the Giants the last several weeks is they're actually playing better football. They almost beat the Eagles last week, and I know the Eagles haven't been playing their best football, but they're still the Eagles. Give me a break. And, they've been playing actually better the last several weeks. And when you have a guy like Barkley who could move the ball and Beckham who could get yards, and you have two offensive standouts. And, anyone that's been paying attention the last few weeks, Eli Manning has been really, playing really well. He had a bad pick the other day, but, he's been actually playing really well, and they move the ball but have a hard time getting into the end zone. And the Giants are actually going up against Tennessee, Dallas, Washington, and Chicago. All good defenses, and good, for the most part, really good red zone defenses, which means the Giants are going to have an even harder time getting into the end zone, which should lead to a lot of field goals. So Aldrick Rosas, I think, is a great pick. And that's pretty much it for Fantasy Football RSVP. That's our website.com. And our Facebook page is the same, Fantasy Football RSVP. Same for, right here on YouTube, our YouTube channel. We're on 8 radio stations, from iTunes to Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, Google Play Music, and so on. You could listen to our podcast if you're driving or anything like that. And of course, subscribe to our channel for the Curry in a Hurry show. I'm always in a hurry to get you a win each and every week in fantasy football. Next season, at the very start before the draft, I'll be bringing in my buddy Jeff Ice for the Curry and Ice show, which will be a great commentary between two people. And we'll be debuting that. And of course, subscribe to our channel if you like this. We'll keep it, going, of course. And the company is growing exponentially, and it's great to have you all part of it. So I wish you all the best with your fantasy football, week 13. We'll be back next time for week 14, and have a terrific day. And I hope you all win your week.